Welcome to Never By the Book podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Schols. At 24, I was dead broke and a full-blown alcoholic. By age 40, I was completely out of debt and financially free. Now I share my secrets to success and transformation with audiences around the world as an author, speaker, success mentor, and of course, your podcast host. Each Never By the Book episode features a guest who has overcome obstacles to build an incredible life. I had the pleasure of meeting today's guest on a recent visit to the great state of Texas and learned about her incredible story. Dr. Lucette Beall knows what it feels like to hit bottom and rebound to live an extraordinary life. Discovering a devastating breast cancer diagnosis as a newly divorced single mom with no child support, then stepping out of her practice to care for her brother after a traumatic brain injury, and finding herself near bankruptcy. Today, we'll learn about her turning point and how she was able to survive, thrive, and build her practice into a highly profitable enterprise. Let's start the conversation with Dr. Lucette Beall. Welcome, Lucette.
Nice to see you again.
You as well. How you been?
Really good. Really good.
We had a great conversation when I was out there in Texas. It's been almost a month ago now.
Right? Time goes fast.
Let's talk about what you've been through. You're a veterinarian by trade.
Yes.
Had a practice going, and then it seems like all hell kind of broke loose.
Yeah, and aren't we grateful for the challenges that give us the opportunities to actually get to learn and grow and live extraordinary instead of ordinary?
Right.
It starts with an awareness, and sometimes we're just wading along, not aware. So I'm grateful. I'm really grateful for, I'm really grateful for the cancer, honestly. I don't know that I would get to be who I am now without it, because it came on top of what was already a challenging time. And it was overwhelming, because I was, 100% financially responsible for not only myself and my child, but also, my employees. And every time I'm not at work, we weren't making any income. And it was 15 months of treatment. And, and initially I didn't come out of the divorce. Does anyone come out of the divorce in a good financial situation? And literally I found the tumor 3 days after the divorce was final.
So was there any history of cancer or anything in your family?
My mother, yes, my mother has had breast cancer. She had different breast cancers. But I had been to the doctor. I had actually been to the doctor, had the breast exam, and they didn't find anything just weeks before I found it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Like when I went back to the doctor, her face kind of turned white when I showed it to her. Cause it had been just such a short time since I had been, and it didn't show up on a normal mammogram either. Once I found it, then they tried to do a mammogram again. It didn't show up. So they had to do an ultrasound to find it. So that was also eye-opening.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Because I had been to the doctor, and so it kind of felt like it was absolutely a God thing that I found it when I found it. Because if it had gone any longer, it was what they called stage 2B. So close to stage 3, and your prognosis starts to go down when you're at stage 3. So I was really, really blessed to find it when I did. Very much so.
Blessed to find it, but it put you in a situation that you had to fight through.
Yes. And it's extremely scary when you think you're the only one responsible for finances, and that you're going to be missing work for surgeries and chemotherapy and radiation, and you don't know how it's all going to go, and you just want to also make sure you finish still here.
Right.
And so there were days when I was like, okay, I just need to narrow it down to 5 minutes, because if I try to think about anything, because I was already financially in a tight situation, and now I was having to step out of my business to take care of the illness, and I didn't have any extra income coming in somewhere else. And so
So your veterinary clinic was running, you were running it, you had some employees.
Yes.
But you had no child support or anything.
Correct.
You're recently divorced and no child support.
Yeah. And I
So
didn't
you were the breadwinner then before you got divorced.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
So how do you go from that, from learning that you got breast cancer, you don't know if you're going to be able to pay your bills, to get in the mindset of turning to, wait a minute, I have to take responsibility. I got to do this. I got to,
That's it. You just hit it. It was more of, you know what? I have to find a way. I'm not willing. And I had someone, an acquaintance in my experience that I had seen fold, going through a difficult time. And,
Right.
and for me, and make really bad choices. And
Right.
I'm not willing to do that. I have to figure out a way. Mentally, I have to do whatever it takes to keep myself. And sometimes that was, what do I need to do in the next 5 minutes? Because if I think about the day, that's too much, and sometimes it was also learning to turn things over to a higher power, to God or the universe, and just say, okay, this needs to
help
happen.
me.
Yeah, like my brain can't wrap around what needs to happen next, so I'm just giving it to you, and trusting that it's gonna be okay. And that's the level that I think getting cancer got, that I don't know if I would have got otherwise, right? Is
Okay.
take control of what's yours, but be willing to give, to trust that the universe, the higher power, God, absolutely is there and will take care of what I can't manage. But I have to ask.
Right.
Like, I have to be willing to say, I'm giving it, because if I hold on to control of it, I can't see the answers that are coming.
Yeah.
Like when I just say, I have no idea how this is going to happen, but it needs to happen. And then the right person walks in the door and says, hey, can I help you out with something today? Yes. Can, and then allowing that in. I wasn't good at accepting help before that. Like, I was not good at receiving. And what I learned from that is how important it is. Not only receiving is important all the time, not just everything gets bigger when we let ourselves receive, because when we're allowing love to come in, that's God's love, that's the universe, whatever you want to call it. That's not just the person's love. It's love flowing through us.
Right.
We let that in, and then we have more to give back. And the ripple effect of that is huge. And that's all the time in our lives, not just when things are challenging. Challenging is an opportunity to learn it, but then to keep that lesson when things aren't so challenging, and allow yourself to receive, allow others to give. And then, that reciprocal huge ripple effect that happens.
Well, sometimes people, and I know I was that way for a lot of years, is I felt if I was taking from other people, or if I was, focusing on myself, I was too selfish.
Yes.
And you and I talked about that. Sometimes you got to be selfish to be selfless.
Yes. I honestly believe the greatest gift you can give to everybody around you is to put yourself first, because you actually have more to give. You're able to be kinder to others around you when you're not at the end of your rope. It's super important, actually. And we feel like it's selfish to do that. And we've often been taught that, but it's the opposite.
Right.
So what you have to give back and what you have to share with others is huge when you put yourself first and take care of your needs, and are willing to do, and it also gives you more compassion. When you become compassionate to yourself, the compassion you have for others is huge, because we tend to judge others by the same rule we judge ourselves. And we tend to be really hard on ourselves, which makes us not as compassionate and kind as we want to be.
Yeah. And I know you're doing coaching and mentoring and stuff with people now. When you were going through all this, did you reach out to anybody and do counseling, or have a coach or anything to help?
I went to counseling. Yes. Yes.
You did. Okay.
Yeah. As soon as I walked out the door, I went to counseling. I said, there's nothing healthy or right or okay about this. And now that I'm finally, acknowledging that, I need to do something to get myself in a better place, in all fairness to, everyone around me, but especially my child. Yes.
Well, and you and I talked about that is, we talked about how many, it's seeing people give up, like you had that friend that gave up. And, we talked about like when my wife passed away, I looked at my daughters and it's like, I can't give up.
Yeah.
You got people relying on you, and it's the same thing with you. You got your daughter relying on you. You're a sole mother, no child support, and you have the business. So it's like, okay, what do I got to do, right?
Yeah.
And
And
that's when,
amazing things happened out of that. They had a fundraiser in Aubrey, but Holly went to school in Pilot Point. We went to church in Pilot Point. So Pilot Point and Aubrey both participated. They raised more money at that fundraiser than they had ever raised in any fundraiser previously. And even though I had insurance, the amount of time I was having to step out of work, that my cancer was over 3 years. So I had
oh,
3
wow.
deductibles. Yeah, because I was diagnosed in December, and in the diagnostics, I met my deductible in December, and then I had to turn around and meet it again in
Oh my
January.
gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, and then another year, because I didn't finish. I was diagnosed in December of 2009. I didn't finish treatment until March of 2011.
Oh, wow. And by then your business is struggling.
It was, I don't think I was much worse off at that point than I was when I
Okay.
started, because I spent a lot of money trying to help my husband, shall we say.
Yeah.
So, it was, we made it. There were
Okay.
people who didn't, I did things like I wore a wig most of the time because I didn't want people to focus on me, and because I
Right.
did some people that were afraid to come because I was felt sorry for me as having to work when I was sick. I honestly felt like I would much rather be at work doing
Yeah.
something I really love and focusing on something besides myself than
Right.
home noticing every ache and pain or feeling, I felt like it was good for me. Felt like it was a better place to
Give you
be.
more of a purpose.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think when you go through something like that, whether, for you or like when I lost my wife, it was the same thing for me. Going back into the office and going to work and the people, it gave me purpose.
Yeah.
So, you're not just sitting there
Thinking about,
thinking about all the negatives, right?
yes. Yes.
Yeah.
You have
So,
some reason to get up. You can, what's the next step I got to do? What's that? And I think personally myself, I think that's hugely helpful for managing,
yeah,
and you get to and I'll be honest, there was so much relief. And I was so thankful that I was divorced before I found it, that
hmm
it would have been tough, 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 if that more so by far. So there was and in some ways it was easier than
because you didn't have a healthy relationship.
right, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It was exhausting.
Yeah.
And so, that in some ways the cancer was, I mean, physically it was exhausting. I mean, I
Right.
remember, in particular, one of the day after chemo,
hmm
and one day after chemo, I remember I was so exhausted that I sat in a chair and they would bring the pets to me in the back because I just didn't have the energy to
Right.
go in and out of all the exam rooms. And, but we made it work. And it would always get better between rounds of chemo.
Right.
Um, you know, and then and then you get done, you're like,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and radiation, I had to leave. I had to go, we had a couple of ice storms during it when I was going through it, which spread it out a little bit, but I had to leave work every day and drive all the way into Denton to get the radiation, drive back. So I was missing several hours of work
Oh,
every day,
wow.
7 weeks.
Wow. So you get through that, everything's kind of looking up, and then your brother has an incident.
Yeah. Yeah. And he had the traumatic brain injury a year after I finished chemo, a year and a half, I guess.
Okay.
Um, and that was a crazy time when it first happened. We didn't, because he wasn't supposed to live. So
Oh,
we
wow.
were driving, he was in the hospital in Oklahoma City, and I live in north of Dallas. And we were, my daughter was in high school and
hmm
in a lot of activities, and then we're trying to drive up there as much as we can on the weekends.
Yeah.
Um, and then, but it was 2 years after that I brought him home. So he was in his senior,
Okay.
she was starting her senior year. he had a lot of damage in different parts of his brain. It was like shaken baby syndrome. And so he was having temper issues and different things, and he'd been in and out of a mental hospital, and then he ended up.
So did he get in an accident or?
Yes, it was a horse accident, but
okay.
yes. Yeah. And he was going to have to stay in the mental hospital if I didn't go get him.
Okay.
And I could not leave him in the state mental hospital for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
I felt God calling so strong. I literally found out, left my practice, went home, packed a suitcase, and drove to Oklahoma. And I left my practice. I didn't step foot in it again for 6 weeks. At that point, I built it to a 2-doctor practice because that was my goals after I had cancer, so that I wasn't the only one.
Right.
And then because I had to step out for him, I ended up having to go back to, I was out for a while. The other doctor was there, which was a giant blessing. But of course, if there wasn't 2 doctors there, it's, then it wasn't a true 2-doctor practice anymore.
Right.
So, I wouldn't trade any of that for the fact that he is not living in a mental hospital and he get to live on his own. And I learned a lot from that too. We could get the opportunity to grow in every challenge that we have. We get to choose that. We can choose to grow, or we can choose to survive, or we can choose to find a way. And it took me a while, really and truly. I got lost when I was stepped out to help him, and I knew I was supposed to do it, but I got overwhelmed. Because financially it got tight really quickly. I knew I wasn't my banker and my parents were all like, you shouldn't do this. You're going to lose your business. And, but I couldn't leave him there. And my parents couldn't do it. They were elderly, and, it was just too much. And so, I think the biggest reason I got lost, I forgot to have that faith, that if I was called to step out and do it, that all the answers would come, and to believe that, for one, that I was worthy of having those solutions. I believed I was worthy to help other people. I believe I was worthy enough for me. And I hadn't got there even after everything else. And so for 3 years after I stepped out to help him, I really struggled financially. I went back to work in the clinic, when I got him to a place, because when I first brought him home, he couldn't be left alone, and he didn't have disability, and there was so much that had to be done. And, he, couldn't drive. And so, it just took a bit.
You say you got lost. How were you able to come back from that?
Honestly, I will say, I spent 3 years struggling financially, working hard. I wasn't not going to work, but I wasn't necessarily figuring out how to work smarter. I was feeling sorry for myself. I was feeling like a failure. I was going to work. I wasn't going on vacations. And one day I woke up and I thought, okay, are you willing to lose everything you've worked for almost 20 years? Or are you going to decide you're going to do something about it? And that was the day. I just decided, I'm not going to lose everything. I can do this. If I can do all the other things I've done, I can turn this around, and I can do this. And it's up to me. There's no one but me to figure this out. And it honestly was a change of attitude. It was making time every single morning when I first got up to pray, read, meditate, read positive affirmations, read positive things, get myself in the best mindset. And at first you can get better and then you get to work, and the credit calling and the challenges are there, and you're struggling again. But I got better at coping with it, as I just was consistent every single day. I went to, like Jack Canfield's had a 1-day through to success seminar in Houston. I drove down there and went to that. I did some in-person things to get myself mentally in the best place possible. And
so it sounds to me like those 3 years you were lost, you quit focusing on yourself at all.
I quit focusing. Yeah, I felt like a failure. I focused on, I was feeling sorry for myself, honestly, to a extent. And there were some breaks in it. Like when I got this house was in the middle of that, and it was a aha moment. And it was rent house to begin with. I've now purchased it. But I had moments in there, but I was yeah, I was, and I, that's why I forgot some of what I'd learned during cancer. Turn it over to God to trust and believe that the answers can come. And the answers were right, because I didn't have to go get, I didn't have to go to business seminars. I just needed to restructure my mind so I could see the solutions that were right in front of me. So I could, I could do this. Oh, I hadn't changed my prices in years, so many things that once I started changing my mindset, then the answers were there. It's not like they weren't there before.
Working on yourself.
Yeah.
Back to working on yourself and looking at yourself. And
well, and the beauty of going through that is I'll never not be doing that again.
Right.
Like the lesson is learned forever. And B, I learned really, truly a lot of processes that I got to use when I had another challenge, and completely, I know they work, and they're the things that I learned going through this. So I don't regret any of that. I don't regret 3 years, because now I never have to go back there.
Right.
Because I know how not to. It doesn't matter what comes my way. I know for sure that I can handle it and that I can be successful.
So you get through that phase, and then you turn around and your business starts thriving again.
Yep.
So how did you get to the point of paying off all your debt and becoming debt free and doing all that?
Honestly, it really came with the mindset change. I just got up and went to work, and I slowly, it started turning around, and I say slow, but in a year, I was almost out of debt. And
that's pretty good. That's not, it probably started slow, but it sounds like that's pretty fast.
Yeah, it went pretty quick once we, exactly. It felt slow at first, but then I looked and went, because I was considerably in debt and owed a lot, was struggling to keep the suppliers, able to pay them enough to keep everything coming in the door. And it wasn't that I didn't have the business, it's that it wasn't being run well. It's like, it wasn't that I didn't have the clients and the patients, so I wasn't running the business well, and so the thing, and right as things really started getting better, and I didn't have a ton of money in the bank, but I had a lot of debt paid off. That's when my parents' health started going downhill. Dad had dementia for a while, and he was, further along with dementia, and then her health, and they still lived on a 500-acre ranch. And my mother was in ICU in Oklahoma City, and I couldn't be with her. And my dad was sitting next to me, and this was the first time he knew me at all. He thought I was his sister.
Yeah.
And that was hard. But at the same time, I was also thanking God that I had a place for him to go. I had signed checks. My mother had someone to be with her, and that all the steps have fallen into place to be able to take care of him. Because with my mom's independence, it came right down to, we couldn't cut it any closer and still have the outcome that I ended up having.
Well, that's something that I talk and coach about too, is making sure you have all that stuff in place. And those are tough conversations to have with parents. What happens if something happens to you?
Yeah. So, and for me, I wanted to have it sooner. I knew very well that I could not with my mother.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to come down to that. And I was just grateful to be able to trust in a higher power to help me have the inspiration and the guidance and the answers right when I had to have them.
Yeah.
Because we had enough stuff in place, and I knew what she had in place, but she didn't want, I had asked her at one point when we started talking about the bank stuff, I was like, Mom, if there's somebody else you trust more, because somebody's got to be able to. And she said, no, I just have a hard time letting go of control. And I'm like, she said, it's not you. And I was like, well, that feels better. But at this point, I just need to know if there's somebody you trust more, we need to do something. Right. Because your health is going downhill. We don't know why. And if you die and we haven't done anything, we have no way to take care of Dad.
Well, at least you were able to have those conversations with her. A lot of people don't even have those conversations.
That's true. And that probably comes from being a business owner too. As I had to, literally when, how my divorce was final 3 days before I found that tumor. I scheduled for surgery only a few weeks after that. Do you know how fast I had to get all my paperwork changed?
Oh, I could imagine.
My word.
Yeah.
I'm literally signing the new will and all of that stuff the day before being admitted to the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't know what's going to happen when you go through surgery, right? So you want to make sure your
No, and
daughter's taken care of.
you do the best you can. Well, I
Yeah.
needed, one of my lawyers said that the best thing you can do is live to be her, for her to be 18, because there's a
Yeah.
certain you can't protect her from. And I took that lesson to heart. I even changed the chemotherapy regime because of that.
Yeah. Well, you made it through. Now what is she now? 20 some years old. And
26.
yeah,
Yeah.
things are good.
Yep.
So you get through all that. The practice is good. And then, so when did you start your coaching and when did you write your books?
So the first book is so both of mine are chapters in anthology books. Yes, Leading with Legacy is my last one, and my first one was Women Who Ignite, which was the very first book in that Inspired Impact series, which is the publisher, and one of the authors is Kate Butler. And she called me. So after I finished cancer treatment, I went to Jack Canterfield's Breakthrough to Success, because at that point I was ready to change my life, learn, work on myself, be the best person that I could be. And I met Kate Butler there. And so she heard that part of my story and she said, your story needs to be told. And so when she started the series, she called me. And I wrote the first chapter while I was actually taking care of my brother.
Okay.
And I really wasn't in the place to do as much with that as I wanted to, because I didn't believe in myself enough then. Honestly, I was struggling financially. I was believing in all the things people had told me, like my banker saying that I wouldn't,
Right.
which good person who cared about me. And that's why that was said. It's just, you get to choose what you believe. And if I was going to step out and do it, then I needed to believe that I was going to be able to handle it and do it. One morning, because every single morning, I'm in that chair, and if I'm traveling, I'm in a chair saying, my prayers and morning meditation, and sometimes journaling, positive, but visioning, but always working on that stuff. And I had a premonition that I was actually supposed to write a book, which is now what I'm working on, called How to Build an Extraordinary Life at Any Age. And at the
Okay.
time, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't feel like I was living an extraordinary life at that point.
Right.
The title wouldn't go away. And so, I mean, literally one day I stood in my kitchen and I was like, okay, God, why? What is this? What does this mean? And Kate called and said, you've been voted on by, well, she didn't tell me exactly. I found out later that's how, but she said, you've been chosen as one of and I knew we had all voted because I had participated in the voting too. I knew that was at least part of it. 20 most inspirational authors in the series. And at that point, the series had over 350 authors. And there were
wow.
that were chosen for that book. Has more in it now. And so I felt like that was where I was supposed to go. I was following the intuition at that point.
Right.
And over the course of the next year, writing that chapter, but also working with Kate, I started at that point I was growing my practice again. But I wasn't really enjoying that part of it. I still loved the veterinary medicine part,
Right.
but I wanted to spend more time really teaching the things that I'd learned for thriving, rather than trying to grow a business. And at one point I thought
Right.
that's where I was supposed to go. And it just didn't feel right. It didn't
Okay.
feel like that was where I was supposed to be. And over time, I just found my joy the more I talked about, all the different things, stuff I'd learned, and got to help other people start to have those aha moments and go from, surviving to thriving, and go from living from the outside in, which is, I call it, when we're dependent on other people's opinions and need people to act a certain way or be a certain way, which is kind of how we're taught. And we
Right.
learn it's all within us. It's just it's living from the inside out and learning totally to know that you have control, so much more control than we realize. Like, I recently did a webinar called Create Your Own Luck. And the whole point is we have a lot more control. We can choose to have a lot more control than we're taught and than we'll realize.
Right.
And God is with us on that journey. He's not a dictator.
Right.
You have to choose to believe, and you have to, we all come with there's a divine part in us and our journey changes. What was your purpose when you were young may not be your purpose when you're older.
Yep.
You know, I mean, you've had life experiences that change your purpose. So have I. Right. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Some people may have the same purpose their whole life. There's nothing wrong with that either, but it's being willing to step into whatever's next.
Well,
And
and you said create your own luck. I've always said the harder I work, the luckier I get, whether I work on myself or my business or being a great father, husband, whatever it is. The more you work on it, the luckier you get with it.
mm-hmm. Well, yes, because you have to decide that you're going to do it.
Yeah.
There's it's part work and part belief.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you focus too much on the work, and that's what I was doing when I was lost, I was working hard, but I
Right.
wasn't working smart. There has to be a component of belief. There has to be a component of vision in there. And that's a little bit of trust and belief that there is something bigger and that you can be more, and
Yeah.
you're worthy of it.
And you're worthy of it. Yeah, that's a big key.
It's a huge key, because I see people, everyone has gifts in them. There's
Mm-hmm.
not one single person who's not worthy and who doesn't have gifts. But if you don't see them, if you don't believe in it, you don't get to shine with it and give it back to the world like you're meant to. And that's the worthiness piece. And that was a piece that I had a hard time with. I think there's a component, and maybe some of it comes from the way we were taught growing up. My parents had a good work ethic for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, and my dad was very successful, but there was a worthiness piece there, I think, for both my parents as well. And it took me many, many years I still have to work at it, but I'm way more there than I'm aware whenever
you're aware.
that voice in my head is not being nice,
Yeah, it's like, get out of here.
Well, now I have a conversation because it's like, I don't even, if I ignore it, am I a condone, right? It's like, oh no, we need to, I was sick not too long ago, and which is rare. And so I was not doing a whole lot for a couple of days, running a little bit of a fever. And then I heard myself saying to myself, well, you've been lazy the last couple of days.
Right.
And I was like, okay. I just said, okay. And I laughed and joked, but I really said, all right, no, I'm not going to own that. I'm not, that's not the case. And it's okay to rest and take care of yourself. And because it is, and it's an important part of really being there for others, is making sure you're there for you.
Right. Yeah. So what's Lucille up to now?
So, I have Dr. Lucette, and I have Extraordinary Life. I am in the process of writing a book.
Okay.
And I do success coaching and speaking. So, and I love doing that too. And I like doing not just speaking, like keynote speaking, but doing workshops. And I really, that's one of my goals, is to do that in the veterinary industry, because our industry as a whole, suicide, we have one of the highest suicide rates of any industry.
Oh, wow.
And it's going through some really tough challenges right now. Our industry is. I'd like to be part of the solution for that, because if you learn to think, if you change your thinking, everything gets easier, and people can thrive no matter where they are if you change your thinking. And a lot of what I have is, how to retrain your brain, really, to learn to think from the outside in. I have reverse learning, because we're taught it's better to give than to receive. And actually, the greatest gift is to learn to receive first. And appreciation, I mentioned it to you. It's a specific way of doing your appreciation. So it's an appreciation journal, but it's not just writing what you appreciate. There's a couple of key aspects of it. One is making sure you feel it. How you feel matters. Guidance. If you're not feeling good, the whole goal, the more you feel better, the more you're able to see intuitions and inspirations. When we feel lousy and not worthy and we're disconnecting ourselves. We're blocking the opportunity for those things to come. They're there. We just can't feel or see them. And so appreciation can really help us with that. And it can help us with that negative voice in our head.
Right.
You know, when you specifically write every day appreciation for yourself, it'll start to change those brain patterns, because that negative voice is so insidious. And for many of us, it was going on for so long. And it, you know, that's how I picked my husband, right? I let people treat me the way I had learned to treat myself. And so you don't recognize it. You don't recognize the meanness because you're already doing it to yourself, and you don't recognize your own voice.
Right.
And so you start to appreciate it every single day, then you'll start to hear it. You're like, wait, what? And so you can start, and I have another one called the reframe game. And it's about learning to change those negative thoughts, those things that are keeping you from being the success that you're meant to be and getting to be all of who you are and share your gifts with others.
So you have your 3-step appreciation. What are the 3 steps?
The 3 steps are how to appreciate, you know, what do I appreciate in others?
Okay.
And right. And the free appreciation journal that has the PDF, but it also has a video explaining it. As far as also making sure you're feeling good when you don't want to write, you know, I'm grateful I have a roof over my head, and it doesn't feel like you either hate the house, it's a rent house or whatever, and it doesn't feel good. The goal is to write things that make you feel good. The goal when you do the journal is to get yourself into a better feeling place.
Yeah.
What do I appreciate in life? So what do I appreciate in others? What do I appreciate in life? And then what do I appreciate in myself? And that's the one that I find that even if people are doing the others, that's the one that they're often weak on. I definitely was. And I know the reason I like that specific, because when we're telling ourselves nothing ever works out for me, if you write that down every day, already you're starting to change that. At least in the morning, even if you go out, you go to work and the creditors are calling and you're like, oh, everything is hard. But when you say everything is hard, that's how it's going to go for you.
That's going to go
So
hard.
understanding that what you put out there matters.
Right.
And that you want to start changing that matters so much.
Yeah. I love that. The 3 appreciations: appreciation in others, in life, and myself. And I think if people would focus on that and just do that, that right there can change their lives.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. And the others start to come, because once you get better at that, because the other thing is, if you have difficult relationship with somebody that you need to have a relationship with, like, you know, a coworker at work or any family member, but it's usually easier. Family members are the hardest because there's such years of that. It's usually easier to start in an easier place. But say you have a coworker that you have a hard time with. If you take the appreciation and you focus on finding things to appreciate about this person that every time you have a conversation, or often when is a challenge, boss, whatever, and you focus on that every morning and you write it down so that it's in your head. And then you may only come up with 1 or 2 things at first.
Right.
And then you get better at it. What will happen at first, it won't feel like it's changing things, but if you're consistent, it will. Because when you get into a relationship like that, your brain especially will go, it happens to us with incidences, all kinds of things where it just goes back to the previous and reacts the same way. And you want to change that because you want a better relationship. So when you start changing it by looking for things to appreciate in them, you start giving yourself time to think. But you'll also start, as you start trying to find things, so you're in this difficult conversation and you're thinking about, what can I appreciate in this person? Or what can I take from this? You're going to start attracting that from them just because you're in a different pace, not having that automatic same response that you've been having. And over time, you're not going to change them, but you can change what you bring out of them. You can change, you know, I mean, my mother, I love her dearly. And, but she was very hard-headed and very independent, and also could be a challenge in a relationship, right? And we all learn things growing up. She had a hard growing up.
Right.
So I don't know, knowing what, I don't, she was doing the best she could with what she had, right?
With the tools she had at the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And she was amazing and was amazing to a lot of people. She could also, though, be extremely negative. And she was as hard on me as she was on herself, right?
Yeah.
But would verbalize it. So at some point I learned that I needed to not necessarily take all of that in, but you can't change the other person.
Right.
Like you try to have those conversations and they don't work, but you can say, I learned to say when it got negative and critical, I love you, Mom. I got to go.
Yeah.
Bye. And
boundaries.
Yes. And that comes from starting to have more self-worth, belief. And then, but the thing is once I learned to really, truly love her and know I just needed to be where I was and love her where she was. You know what happened? One day I went, I love you. And she went, oh, I didn't mean to be negative. When I'd stopped trying to change her, loved her where she was, but allowed myself to have the boundaries that I needed, then we were able to have a better relationship.
Yeah.
Now, it didn't change her in the sense that every now and then she could go down that path. I still had to be clear, right?
Right.
But when I was clear with love, then it was okay because you might not talk to her that day, but you might talk to her 3 days later, right? In other words, it didn't go for a long time period like it had to at first, right? And so our relationship was in a really good place before,
Good.
Before it was, we had some good that last time. Cause see, I barely got her here. I got her here for 6 days. That's why I said she almost did die with her boots on. I honestly think she just came here long enough to make sure Daddy was taken care of, her beloved. And then she was done.
Yeah.
She went back in the hospital here and she had a surgery. And then after the surgery, she seemed better the first day. And the second day I stayed with her I came home like at 10 that night. And she had the nurse call me at 2 a.m. and tell me that she was done. She wanted to.
Oh, wow. She wanted to go. She was ready.
And she did not have it. She had not been diagnosed with anything terminal. And I'm going to tell you that she showed me what will can do, whatever will you choose, because she told me that on Saturday night and she passed away on Monday afternoon. And
she was ready.
She was, I think she was grieving Dad. Dying with dementia. She just couldn't, she adored him. She worshiped him. She could not stand to see him go that way. And she was done.
Yeah. Well, and she knew that you were in a good spot.
She knew he was taken care of. She knew, and we had enough. There was a lot of things I didn't know because neither of us knew it was going to be that fast. And she had kept a lot to herself for a long time, but I had enough. I had enough.
Good. So your new book, when's your new book going to be out?
I hope this fall.
This fall? Okay.
I'm trying to fit it between, because I'm still working, 2 to 3 days a week in veterinary clinics and speaking and coaching. So I'm fitting it in between the other things.
Okay.
I probably, what I really need to do, like everything else, is just set a deadline so that I have no choice but to get it done.
Yeah. Awesome. So how can people get a hold of your books and get a hold of you?
I'm on Facebook as Dr. Lucette. I have a YouTube channel, which we have, gosh, I don't know how many, well over 100 videos now. We put out at least 5 videos a week. I have a TikTok channel which is growing now. If you go to drlucette.net, you can find all the things. The reframe game that I mentioned is there, as well as the appreciation.
Perfect. Thank you for being on. Any parting words for our guests?
Each and every one of you is absolutely worthy of an extraordinary life. An extraordinary life is really about living from the inside out, meaning that you don't need others' approval, their love, sure, and to be who you are. And it's so important because you get to be more of who you are, which is such a gift back to everyone that you love and that loves you, when you are able to really, truly step into that. And your ability to love them and be compassionate to them grows exponentially when you live that way.
Thank you for being on. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening to Never Buy the Book. Share it with someone you care about, and don't forget to subscribe through your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss an episode. As we close today, remember, if you're not doing it by the book, it might just mean you're onto something great. Until next time, be great.